I'm kind of a stranger in a strange land here because I'm somewhat of a Hollywood creature. I made a film called The Lawnmower Man 25 years ago. So I come at this whole thing from the standpoint of a storyteller, having created a context for virtual reality, popularized the term. Nobody knew anything about it at the time my movie came out, and then suddenly everybody knew about it. So I experienced that, and I've experienced that over the last 25 years in getting involved specifically with what I call virtual experience, or VX, because I'm sort of done with the VR, AR, MR, all the Rs, because there's so many different ways those are going. So I'm interested in how virtual experience is coming at us like a giant tsunami, albeit a bit slowly, but it is coming at us in a very, very compelling and important way for the development and evolution of human culture. And blockchain as a foundation, as an idea behind that, is incredibly important, I think, to how virtual experience becomes integrated into culture in a way that's possibly positive or possibly negative. Because this is a medium that I've primarily been a cautionary tale teller. I've basically been telling stories that are warnings about virtual reality, and of course the irony is that it helped popularize the whole thing. So that's what you get for telling cautionary tales. I have a company called Studio Lightship, and we are focused on creating our own creative IP, and also working joint ventures with very interesting projects where we're bringing the idea of a transmedia ecosystem that has a VX story world at the core. So our holy grail are VX story worlds. And all of that process that we are pioneering right now with some very interesting JV partners and also on our own indigenous IP content are based on a foundation of blockchain. Because without that at the core, we're going to have the same flaws that are in the current system of the internet, that are in current systems of all social media, and the things that are literally deconstructing a lot of different culture right now around the world because of those flaws. If you talk to the guys that created HTTP and the internet, there's actually some really interesting decentralized internet conferences that have happened. Some of you may have been to them. These guys are basically screaming, we didn't build it all the way, we didn't build it right, and it needs to be changed. And so blockchain represents that change, and that change as a foundation for virtual experience, I think, is incredibly important. At the end of The Lawnmower Man, when Job translates himself into the net and all the phones on the planet ring simultaneously, that was his birth in the blockchain, as far as I'm concerned. Because he was definitely a decentralized being at that point. So he was about a human being becoming a decentralized force within a network. And I've been thinking about that for a very long time. I always learn a lot more at these gamer conferences because gamers understand virtual experience and agency and these things much, much better than Hollywood does. I consult to the studios about virtual experience and how they can get into virtual reality, and of course they really don't know what that means or have any idea about how that connects to what they currently do, which it really doesn't, because their entire model is based upon gatekeeping. And gatekeeping is what blockchain and the empowerment of blockchain takes completely out of the equation of the creation of games, of worlds, of universes. Decentraland, I think, is an incredibly interesting play because it literally is creating virtual real estate. And that's how I think that's the best metaphor for virtual experience, is that we're building real estate and we have to be empowered in the creation of that without a centralized authority gatekeeping our creativity and what we want to empower. because I believe at the core, virtual experience has the potential of being a tremendously transformative medium, one of the most transformative in the history of humankind. It also has the potential of being one of the most negative mediums in the history of humankind. And both things are probably going to happen at once. But if you allow creative empowerment at the core of virtual experience and allow that to be its strongest essence, that's going to be what carries virtual experience into a positive, evolving form of human communication and human activity. As soon as it's allowed to be part of something that is mediated, that is gatekept, it is going to be something that is, I think, inherently negative. And so I'm out there talking a lot about the ethical framework around virtual reality and virtual experience. And I think over the last several years, as blockchain has really started to become this foundational conversation and infrastructure, it is in some ways the solution to that ethical framework. And it's important for us to build these things in endemically from the very beginning in those of us that are creating for this new mediums. Now, games are inherently, for me, virtual experience because they have the concept of agency, of interactivity. But what I'm trying to go for is I'm trying to find the undiscovered country between gameplay or even more large game logic and cinematic narrative, which seem to be very much opposed to each other. But it's interesting, when you get into a room and you bring what I call facetiously unholy alliances to the table, meaning people from the gaming world, people from the narrative world, and really start to focus on a process of ideating around that undiscovered country, around something that is in between gameplay and narrative, and trying to create the foundation of what I'm calling a virtual story world. That virtual story world experience is going to have the emotional engagement of cinema, a lot of the craft, high craft of cinema, and the high craft of game design, simultaneously merging together. And that's what I think blockchain gaming is sort of forcing into the conversation, because you have to think about it in an inherently different way, which activates the group mind. Because blockchain is about empowering the group intelligence and allowing us to take the human mess out of verification, the human mess out of mediation, so it's true disintermediation, and allowing that to be something that I believe eventually will be very merged with AI. And these are the things that we're looking at for creating virtual experience. We're working a lot with AI character behavior that's connected to a kind of emotional blockchain verification. When we talk about creating game items, there are story items that can be created, genre items, genre tropes, story tropes, emotional genres. All of these things have a kind of agency and an entity-like status within a true virtual story world. And that's what's really exciting about this. This is an incredibly exciting time because of the emergence of this blockchain, incredible infrastructure reaching up to us from the foundations of economic determinism. And for me, it is truly where virtual reality is actually reaching up into our daily lives. And one person here, I think the gentleman from Decentraland said, we need to get people beyond just the ones that are the enthusiasts for crypto into these new modalities. I could not agree more. Because what is necessary now, and one of the things we're focused on at Studio Lightship, is creating context for a mass market or a mass audience, however you like to think about it, for these new human behaviors. I happen to experience that a bit with the Lawnmower Man because suddenly something that no one even ever heard of before was suddenly something that was in the dialogue, and it created a context. Of course, there wasn't an industry to follow up on that context 25 years ago. We thought there was going to be, but it kind of petered out. And I experienced that, that interesting slope of VR. We're now in another sort of backlash to VR, which doesn't mean that tsunami's not coming, because it's generational. It's a human instinct to want to create ourselves and recreate ourselves in a virtual sense, because it's ultimately the unleashing of the human imagination. And if we can unleash the human imagination in a way that is not gate-kept, like, for example, I was a kid with imagination from Toledo, Ohio. I moved to Hollywood. I happened to move to a place called Santa Cruz and dropped into a group of people that included Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs and a guy named Jaron Lanier, just in parties. That's how it happened. That's why my entire career track went the way it did, because I was in Silicon Valley at a very unique time, and I was wanting to make science fiction films in Hollywood. That confluence, that interesting merging of ideas is something that informed me, and I think that's exactly what's going on at this conference, this merging of these two disparate ideas, blockchain and gaming, and everyone's trying to figure out what the hell is that. That's a very good thing. This is something for us to, this is an incredibly interesting conference to me, because there aren't simple answers to what's being talked about. You go to these industry conferences and everyone says, and this is how you market it, and this is how you bring it up, and it's just about as boring as batshit. This is not boring, because this is about a revolutionary thing that is generational, that's going to change the world and change the way humans interact with each other, change economic determinism, change so many aspects of value and the way value is measured and created. This is major stuff, especially for a storyteller. For me, the stories around this, the self-reflexivity of telling stories that engage the context of this particular thing we're talking about, couldn't be more exciting as a storyteller. I now call myself a story worlder, because we're actually basing our process on creation of world assets. We're not starting with scripts. Scripts are a 1935 process that really have very, actually Stanley Kubrick called it the most incommunicable form of literature ever devised. And he was right. He's one of my high rabbis. So, right now, there is an opportunity to really deconstruct and decentralize not just the infrastructure at a technical level, but the way in which we think and ideate and conceptualize around creation. Creation as humans, interactivity and creation as humans, communication and creation as humans. And that is a huge thing that touches every vertical we could possibly imagine. So you're talking about blockchain gaming. That's not just a little thing about some new form of game that's starting. It's something that's going to touch everything. Because the gamification of every vertical across the board is something that I'm experiencing. As an example, we're involved with a medical data visualization project out of the Danish Technical University involving some of the top human microbiome researchers, because they have a data set that's non-human scale. It's trillions of interactions of bacteria in our gut that are affecting everything in our health. And as a matter of fact, it's changing diagnosis in Western medicine. It's coming out of the Harvard Medical School. It's very, very disruptive medical knowledge that also has data associated with it that they can't use old modalities to understand. They have to use virtual experience. They have to use an immersive environment where we take that data, abstract it, and allow you to interact with it in a gamified way that gives you outcomes in your research understanding, gives you epiphanies that you wouldn't have by looking at a spreadsheet that would go around this room 1,000 times. So there are the things we're doing in order to bring together the multidisciplines that are necessary for that project are going to inform everything we're doing in the context of quote-unquote entertainment, because all of it is entertainment. It's human engagement. You can't go into an immersive environment without there being emotional comfortability, without you wanting to stay there. There's all kinds of things with sonics, and there was a bunch of lists about audio. There are many disciplines that are brought to this than are what are brought to a feature film, that it makes it very, very exciting, because it is new territory. And what I want to say is basically that it is an important thing to keep the revolutionary spirit behind. The mythopoetic nature of blockchain and what is happening with virtual experience is something that this small group of people at this conference are involved with. It's going to be involving everyone on the planet very quicker than we could imagine. Remember when mobile first started coming out on smartphones? It felt like mobile games are never going to work. It was really like it was a ghetto basically at first. Suddenly, where are we? The entire infrastructure of representative democracy is going to be completely deconstructed by those same devices. And so what's going to happen with virtual experience? Blockchain is the thing that allows us to think of it in the context of not allowing too much power to be centralized in one place. And that's literally the history of humankind. So this is an extremely important thing. And as a storyteller, as a story worlder, I just wanted to, at the end of this conference here, engage you in that dialogue, because that to me is what's most important, to keep the fire of what's truly revolutionary about this going. And it also happens to make the best story. It also happens to make the best way of discussing this, of even involving yourself in it. The blockchain games that are self-reflexive to the idea of blockchain massive collaboration, that's something that's very interesting, because massive collaboration is something that's never really happened before. It's all been segmented in the world. We now have the ability to activate the group hive mind and the group intelligence in a way that's never been done before. So beyond just massive collaboration, this is also about efficiency in human collaboration and efficiency in unleashing the power of the human imagination. And that's what the stakes are here. The stakes are high. I believe we do need to do more to create context for a mass market around this. We need to tell stories about it. We need to engage it in stories. I'm personally going to be doing that with about every project I have. I'm also launching a new reboot of Lawnmower Man Reborn called L-Man Reborn that involves a world in which all of this is happening. And we're playing with the self-reflexivity of what is virtual experience in the nature of the story and what happens with the characters and their emotions and their intimacies and their loves, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's really what it gets down to. This is about a human experience of connecting to everyone else and allowing machines to let that happen without the human mess. What a wonderful thing for machines to do for us. That is a truly positive, mythopoetic thing that we can embrace. You know, there's so much negativity around AI and, Skynet. You say AI and basically go on the street, you're going to hear Skynet, right? That's because that's the story we're telling. We need to tell a different story. We need to focus this on the better angels of our nature in order for this to become something that's a truly positive outcome beyond just enabling a different kind of game. Because this different kind of game is actually something that's the game of life. It's the game of interactivity amongst humans on an increasingly smaller and smaller planet. And that is an important thing. And so this conference and what it's talking about, that confluence of these things, is actually much more important than I think people really realize. It is an incredibly, it's a moment of epiphany. It's a moment that we need to grasp, and really all of us from every angle of this embrace it. Now, the fact for me that it happens to connect with virtual experience, it really is the foundational aspect of virtual experience, is something I'm going to integrate into everything I'm doing and try to do that in a way that truly unleashes creative empowerment. Because I believe creative empowerment is the Coca-Cola of virtual experience. It's the thing that will be truly adopted by humans. And you can watch it already in what exists out there right now. Not much compelling exists out there right now. It's still at a very low level. You can't go out in the street in Toledo, Ohio, where I'm from, and show somebody a virtual experience and get them go, wow, I need to do that every day of my life. Doesn't exist yet. We have to bring a tremendous group of technologies and expertise sets together to do it. But the good news is I've been traveling the world. I speak everywhere in the world about this, and I'm finding the things that are under the radar. The pieces of technology exist to do this at a truly compelling level. Meaning it can be done at a truly evil level as well. I happen to have an experience consulting to DARPA for a little while, and that was really interesting because supposedly there's a light DARPA and a dark DARPA. Of course, I was talking to the light DARPA guys, and they told me about the dark DARPA, and they're creating virtual experience torture environments. That's what they're doing with it, and they're very far along. That's something that I think we have to fight in our stories, in the emotion around this, not just focusing on the technology. When people talked about we need to defocus on the technology, couldn't be more true, because we need to focus on the larger mythology. Now, this all folds into what very good friend of mine from a very long time ago, Joseph Campbell, who I met at Esalen Institute when I was very young, and he told me I should follow the mythology of the global human. I believe that blockchain and virtual experience are the activation points for the global human, as Joseph Campbell was talking about it. The true integration and interdependencies around human beings, not around structures that are controlling human beings. So it's a moment, I think, of decision. And those of us that are artists working in the space, those of us that are technologists, those of us that are both, need to take the platonic responsibility to really focus on making this the most positive thing for human evolution possible, because I believe this is going to be much more impacting than most people usually think. It tends to be thought of as in a kind of cavalier way. It's not. There's nothing cavalier about this. And of course, in the crypto world, it's all focused on speculation. I'm not talking about crypto speculation. And boy, after it's like, who knows what's going to happen there? But I do know that blockchain, integrated into virtual experience, can create something that could be a significant aspect of human evolution and can free us to actually create without gatekeepers. And there's so many, I was a kid that came from Toledo and had to go to Hollywood, and there was like 10 guys I had to make like me and think I was talented in order to make a movie. That's insane. The amount of talent that exists on the planet, the amount of creative inspiration and imagination, it has to be unleashed now, because the challenges we have are going to take the wisdom of that hive mind, of that group mind. And this is actually a big piece of that, I believe. A big piece where the technology, which is coming from us, it's not something unnatural that's falling from outer space. It's just a natural evolution of us, is actually empowering that aspect of ourselves. And I'm going to continue telling stories about that, and I hope you do as well. Thank you.